Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our very first Writer Series event of the 25-26 season. You know the first thing I always ask you to do, please turn off your cell phones. Even if you think it's off, will you look at it now and check and make sure? And while you're doing that, I wanted to tell you that our fearless leader and founder, Jamie Kabler, can't be with us today because he's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a crossing on the Queen Mary 2, one of the things on his bucket list. So together, I want us all to say, ahoy, Jamie. One, two, three. Ahoy, Jamie. I also want to thank our wonderful Rancho Mirage City Council. They had a very big day today. They had the State of the City address at the Omni Hotel, but they're represented by our council member, Eve Fromberg-Edelstein. Thank you for being here. None of this would happen without the City of Rancho Mirage, the wonderful staff here at the library, and of course the City Council. I also want to thank the underwriter for the Writer Series events, Jordan Schnitzer, who is the one that enables us to provide all of you with a free book today. So thank you to Jordan. And of course, in the front couple rows are our angels. They underwrite 90% of our festival and these shows as well. So thank you to all of your angels for the continued support. If you didn't get a book today, there's more available. You might want to buy some for your friends. Follow bookstores in the back. He'll be selling books at the end of the presentation. And again, like always, please line up on this wall if you would like to have your book signed by Barry and have a conversation, get a picture. That all will occur right there by those windows. So, we have more Writer Series events this fall. Next week, please join us for Emily Weinstein, who is the editor of the New York Times Cooking. And she comes along with a cookbook for all who are in attendance. So I think you'll like that. Today, it's our pleasure to welcome Barry Petersen, an award-winning journalist whose distinguished career with CBS News has taken him around the world, covering many of the most compelling stories of our times. Barry's also the author of Jan's Story, the book in your lap. It's a deeply personal and moving account of his wife's journey with early onset Alzheimer's. It's a book that's resonated with readers everywhere for its honesty, its grace, and the courage it took to write it. Barry will be joined by Doug Miller, who's a justice on the California Court of Appeals. He's also an avid reader, a fly fisherman, a Tai Chi master. He teaches Tai Chi at Sunnylands on Saturday. And I'm happy to say he's also my husband. Please welcome Barry and Doug.
Please. Go ahead. Come on.
Be that way.
I was born in Virginia. I'm a gentleman. Which side? There. Hello. Thank God they took the picture down of the young me.
So I'd say welcome to the desert, but you've had a place here for the last 8 years, so welcome to the Rancho Mirage Library.
Thank you. What a fabulous facility. Worth moving here for.
So isn't it wonderful to be back? Isn't the weather great? Isn't this why we live here? Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. So you're in for a treat because this is a special and unique book. I kind of felt like when I read this book, almost like I was standing outside the window of their home or wherever they might have been, watching inside, actually as it happened. And there were some times even when I felt almost invited in to the house and was a part of the experience. This is a wonderful, wonderful, well-written book. So we're in for a treat tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, well, it's not easy, because it's a personal, intimate look at a journey. So As everyone here knows, I'm fascinated by titles, and usually that's my very first question, why the title? But we're going to get to that in a minute, because I think I want to start with Jan. Jan's someone from the book that I think I would have liked to have known. Even more than that, probably have wanted to be her friend. So my first question is, who's Jan? How did you meet? How did you fall in love?
We,
I know.
had to start with that one.
Yeah.
I was based in LA for CBS, and I would travel up to Seattle where she was an anchor. And then over time, I met her. The short story was I was up there crashing on a story in the affiliate, sitting at an empty desk using a typewriter, and this person behind me came up and said, "What are you doing at my desk?" And according to her, I ripped the paper out and walked away and found somebody else's typewriter. So that was the auspicious beginning of our relationship. But there was a point, there was a night, I knew I was going to spend my life with her. I literally was in a car. I had to pull over to the curb and stop for a minute and realize that I had just been slammed by something so strong. And it went from there.
So I think married in 1985, right? I could spend the next 50 minutes talking about your career because it's amazing. You weren't a news anchor sitting behind a desk. You were someone out in the field, and you were at some of the most dangerous places in the world. But I want to talk about 2005. Was there, and we're here to talk about Jan's illness, Jan's Alzheimer's. So was there a moment, an aha moment when you said, "Oh my gosh, something's not right"?
There were moments when I realized she wasn't there. There were moments when I realized she would come and tell me that there were people talking in the living room and things like that. And there were moments she couldn't remember what we had done the last couple of days. It was gone. And I became increasingly concerned, so I called a neurologist in San Francisco and started to describe some of these things. And the neurologist said, "Well, she's got Alzheimer's." I said, "How the hell can you know that?" "She's got Alzheimer's." So I hung the phone up. Jan came in. It was very early in the morning because we're on opposite sides of the clock, like 5 in the morning or something. Jan came in, and I said, "Darling, the doctor says you've got Alzheimer's." And her reaction was, "Well, we'll take the pills and we'll beat it." And that was her attitude all the way through the time when she had an ability to have an attitude like that. It didn't deflate her. It didn't do anything. It was like, okay, well, off we go. Another adventure.
So there's a great line in the book. You say, quote, "Your self-imposed blinders to what was happening." What did you mean by that?
The subword for Alzheimer's is a D word, denial. Do everything you can not to see it. To the point, my daughters from my first marriage, we were driving one time, we were in Northern California, we were driving along, and afterward, the 4 of us on a trip, and afterward, my daughter came to me and said, "Dad, Jan keeps asking the same questions over and over again." Not a problem for me. I said, "Well, we just came in from Tokyo, and there's a front moving through, and there's probably, some pressure thing that's bothering her ears, so I don't think it's a problem." How do you do that? You do it because you don't want to possibly imagine what you're seeing is what you're seeing. So I was very good at the D word for a very long time.
So did you actually go to a doctor and get a testing and get a diagnosis?
Flew right away to San Francisco, went to a neurologist. She took the test that you take, which is a piece of paper, and the neurologist said, she has Alzheimer's. And here's the thing with Alzheimer's. You're alone. There are no other doctors to go to. There's no chemotherapist. There's no physical therapy. There's nothing like that. When the neurologist says that, that's the last doctor you're going to see because there's nothing else you can do. You can take some medications from your family doctor. You could do things like that. But there is nothing else that people help you with. So you're on your own. You're on that journey. Friends can help you, but you don't have a doctor or a specialist or somebody holding your hand saying, "Okay, we're going to try this. Okay, we're going to try that." basically on your own, especially when you live overseas.
So what was the diagnosis?
Alzheimer's. Now, let's be clear. Everybody thinks that Alzheimer's is Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. So dementia is the top, and Alzheimer's, Lewy body, vascular dementia. It's like car is at the top, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler. So Alzheimer's is a version of dementia, and there are other kinds and other causes. They pretty much unfold the same way in the end.
And did she have a particular type of Alzheimer's?
No, she just had plain old Alzheimer's. So,
is there a difference between Alzheimer's and early onset Alzheimer's?
Yes, early onset is unusual because, as it would suggest by the name, it starts very early. In her case, she was 55. And it moves more rapidly. For all the things that they don't know about Alzheimer's, they know, but they don't know why. That when you develop early onset Alzheimer's, it's much faster in its deterioration of the brain than Alzheimer's at a later age.
So now I want to get back to the book and the reason for the book. Because the book, as I said, it's hard. It's
You're telling me?
Yeah. It's just like you, there are pages I marked where I cried. But the book is very personable, it's very intimate, it's very candid. Why did you decide to share that?
I started writing the book because I didn't want to lose her. I thought, I'm going to write a book about Jan. I know she's dying. I know she has Alzheimer's. Somehow I can just keep her. People can meet her. You can meet her. And that was the whole point of writing the book. And then as it went along and as the journey unfolded, I realized what depth I was in, like writing this book from the bottom of the ocean, trying to look up to see light.
And why the title, Jan's Story?
Well, love lost, they call Alzheimer's the Long Goodbye. And Jan's story, because as I explained, it was her story, which turned out to be more a story about her and about her journey and about how we dealt with it and how we tried so hard to keep our togetherness until we couldn't, until it was gone.
So was it about Jan, about you, or our story? What was your goal when you sat down to write the book?
I think in every Alzheimer's journey is individual. So I say to people, this is just ours. This isn't like everybody's. But I really believed that if you were at the cusp of this, when I was coming to the end of this, maybe it would be helpful to know you had a friend, somebody who'd gone down the same road. Alzheimer's, as a disease, isolates you increasingly and increasingly. The caregiving responsibilities become more important. You don't have friends. You know why you don't have friends? You don't have friends because Jan stopped being able to interact. I remember we went to a dinner one time, 8 people, and it was in Beijing outside on a terrace, and we were all having a great time, yada, yada, yada. And I realized at the end of the dinner, she had said nothing. She was afraid to talk. She was afraid to say something. And I said to myself, I'm never going to put her in that situation again, which means I'm not going to be going to dinner parties with people again. I'm never going to let that happen to her again, because you could see she was struggling, but she was afraid. And as you go along, your world gets smaller and smaller because the needs of the person become greater and greater. And then you start hitting the 24, 36-hour day. This is a book, The 36-Hour Day. You start hitting the day where you're not really operating on other people's time. And she needed more and more care and more attention. And you don't have time for friends. And then friends don't know what to do. People who want to help you don't know how. There's a moral in that. If you have people, I'll say this, if you know someone who has a friend going through this Alzheimer's, or you cared for your wife with cancer, things of that sort, I beg people, don't call up and say, what can I do? A man especially will say, I'm fine. You don't need to do anything for me because I'm a guy. Do it. Bring food. Make a phone call. Talk to the person. Because when he says, I'm fine, I don't need anything, it's a flat out lie. But people are so afraid to impose on you that you really have to be, if you want to be a friend, pick up the phone and call. You had that with your wife. Somebody called you every day just to say hello, how are you doing, yada, yada, yada. And I think to maintain that connection is so important because that's the friend of all the friends who've gone away.
So you did something very unique. You, during this entire process, kept notes, wrote emails, kept people updated. Why did you decide to do that?
My only recourse was to do what I've always done, which is to write. That's all I know. Everything to me is I've got to write. I've got to get it down. It makes sense when I put it into words. This is not unusual. People deal with therapy. If you've gone through a traumatic situation, a therapist will try to get you to talk about it so you can put it into words. And when you can put it into words, you can begin to understand it. To me, it was always about writing, sending notes out to people, being open and aware of what was going on until it got so hard to write. But I didn't want to lose her by not writing, remembering things, keeping track. And I begged to God that nobody else would have to go through this same thing. But if they did, I wanted them to see that you can get through it. With luck, you can survive it. Because caregivers tend to go down sooner than the person with the disease. And I have no great moral imperative to save the world. I just had the overwhelming desire to save the next person who was on the journey behind me. That's it.
Did Jan know you were writing the emails?
No, at that point she could no longer, see, the Alzheimer's starts in the frontal part of the brain. Short-term memory, executive memory, things of that sort. So even if she had read the email, she wouldn't have remembered it. I mean, I didn't keep anything from her, just that she no longer had that ability to do that. Here's a weird thing. Jan stopped being able to read. But I can't tell you when, because she did such a good job of masking it. I would come home, in the morning, we'd get together and read the paper, and I'd come home at night and she'd be on the sofa reading the paper. It never occurred to me that she couldn't read. If you go to a restaurant, stop and think about this. If you go to a restaurant, the waiter comes up and what does he say? Oh, tonight's specials are this, this, and this. And she's like, wow, that sounds good. I think I'll have that. She didn't have to read the menu. Or she'd say, what did we have last time we were here? Oh, that sounds great. So I have absolutely no idea when she lost the ability to read because she was so good at hiding it and masking it because she was so ashamed of what was going on.
So that's interesting. So can I ask how you feel that she was ashamed? How you knew that?
It was like powerless. Totally powerless. Every man in this audience, I think, will understand that a man's job is to take care of the people he loves. My job was to take care of her. My job was to not let this happen to her. I would have done anything in the world, but I couldn't do that. So I felt as if I failed every day. And I couldn't keep this thing away. Maybe that sounds like silly, illogical. There's no point even saying that. But the point is, that's what I felt. I felt like I was somehow supposed to have been able to take care of her, and I failed. So every day that it got worse, I felt worse, I felt more guilty, and I felt that I'd failed in what I was supposed to do for the woman that I loved.
So how did you balance feeling that and what was happening to her and try to still maintain some semblance of reality and do your job and take care of her? How did you balance that during that time period?
God, I'd like to say I did a good job. For crap is how I did it. It was very hard. I'm in a job where, this is when I was living in Tokyo and Beijing. We'd go back and forth between the two cities. When you're a foreign correspondent, I used to joke, it's true. When you're a foreign correspondent, you get up in the morning, you don't know what country you're going to sleep in that night. You can be sent away by a phone call. I got sent away one time to Pakistan for 2 months because somebody called me and said, you got to go. This is when Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal guy, was being held and ultimately beheaded. So you've got to you don't have a lot of control over that either. So I tried very hard to create environments that were safe for her. I called every day, a couple of times a day. You know, don't tell CBS, because I'm sure they spent $1 million on my phone calls. But I had to reach out to her. I wanted to see how she was doing. So I always tried to make sure that my presence was there, no matter where I was in the world, or no matter what friggin' awful story I was on. I'd pick up a phone and I'd call, and we would talk every day. So that was what I could do when I wasn't there. And then when I was there, I tried to just shield her and protect her and pretend that we were having a normal life.
Did she know?
Yeah. She knew at the beginning. See, that's the thing about when you lose your executive memory, your short-term memory, you kind of lose your awareness, your sense of awareness. When it first started, she came to me one time and said, "I'm losing my mind, aren't I?" And I was like, "No, you're not losing your mind." What am I say? Yes, you're losing your mind? No, you're not losing your mind. We're gonna deal with it. We're gonna take care of it, et cetera, et cetera. Until then, at some point, she had no awareness that she couldn't remember. So even that kind of awareness disappeared as the disease went forward, for better or worse.
So I think it's probably the dedication, and I think I started to cry on the second page of the book. But maybe I could have you read this. Okay. It's actually before the book starts, and I know it might not be easy, but I think it's important.
To everyone who reached out with a phone call, an email, a letter, or a hug, and to the one who ever so gently pulled me back from the abyss and then patiently taught me what every caregiver who cries through the night's darkness needs to know: you are not alone.
So tell me about Richard.
Oh, Richard Lundgren?
Yes.
If you live in the U.S. and you have Alzheimer's, or you have any kind of a disease like that, you can find support groups that will help you and talk to you about it. When you live in Tokyo, the support group, the only one I could find was 90-year-old Japanese people who spoke Japanese, because it just wasn't. So at some point, I finally ended up crossing paths with a guy named Richard Lundgren, who was in Seattle. And I described him as my Alzheimer's buddy. Now, he had a wife who was in the same situation at approximately the same stages. I could call him and I could talk and I could say, "I'm seeing this." He said, "Oh yeah, I saw that before and it's going to be like this," or "I'm seeing that." He said, "Well, tell you what, I'll ask the support group and we'll talk about it." So he became my kind of long-distance Alzheimer's buddy who was on the same journey with me. He was like, we were arm in arm going down the road, and I could ask him and talk to him about things I didn't need to explain to him because he was on the same trip.
Then you had another friend, too.
Sorry?
You had another friend, your agent.
Oh,
Tell
God.
us about him.
My agent was Richard Liebner. Richard Liebner is a legend in TV news. He's the one who made Dan Rather, Dan Rather. And he represented the people at 60 Minutes, and he represented many of us. And he represented me for years. I called him up one night, because it was nighttime, middle of the night, because if we're in the time zone in Tokyo. And I said, "Richard, I have to quit. You have to get me out of my contract. I'm going to leave CBS. I'm taking Jan home, and I'm going to take care of her." And he said, "No." I'm like, "What do you mean, no?" He said, "I'm not doing that." I said, "Why?" He said, "You're going to need this job for after." I hung up the phone. I literally fell on the floor. It never, in all of that time, it had never occurred to me that she was going to die. It never struck me. After meant Jan would be dead. Say that word, Jan would be dead. And he was wise enough and smart enough to tell me that, and I was wise enough and stupid enough to cry about it, But I got the message. So I stayed with the job. I kept it because I thought it'll be there for me after. And now I knew after that one phone call that there was going to be an end and an after.
So how did you know that?
Can I blow my nose? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I may be the judge, but you don't have to ask permission.
Right.
So how did you know when the point came that you could no longer be the caregiver?
Oh, wow. I knew that because I was so friggin' smart. So to solve the problem of traveling that I did, I finally hired a retired nurse to come and live with us. In Tokyo, there was room in the apartment. In Beijing, she shared an apartment with another person on the staff, and she flew back and forth. And if I had to go to Beijing, then she would take Jan a couple of days later and bring her to Beijing, or fly back, or do all that stuff. And it was great. And I thought, I've bought a couple of years now. I have Diane here. She's watching over Jan. She'll take care of Jan. No matter where I am, if I'm gone, or if we're going to Tokyo, or we're going to Beijing, or we're yada, 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 I have resolved and solved the problem for 2 years. I figured 2 years. 8 months into her time there, she sat down and said, you know, I think it's time to really think about putting Jan in assisted living. I'm like, Jan hasn't changed that much. Why would we do that now? I know she's gotten worse because she gets worse, but she's not that worse. Diane said, we're not talking about Jan. She had been tracking my blood pressure. She was a nurse. She'd been making notes. My blood pressure was beyond comprehension. My main food groups were alcohol and popcorn, which may have explained part of that. She said, you're going down. And when you do the research, you realize that that's not unusual with people who are caregivers for Alzheimer's patients. Even young people like me, well, young at the time, even young people like me. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm going down? And she walked through and she explained, and we talked about the stress, we talked about what was going on. And I said, well, I don't think we have to do this right now. And she said, what will happen to Jan if you are not here to take care of her? I'm like, okay, we're putting her into assisted living. Because the one thing that I had promised was I would take care of her. And if I died in the process, it was another promise unfulfilled. So we did that. Bless her heart.
So I know it's hard to read these, but your writing is so descriptive and so good. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to ask you to read something. It relates to what we're talking about. It's the last paragraph here. Starts with listening.
When I wrote the book, I referred to Alzheimer's as the disease, with a capital T, a capital D. The disease. And I swore that the disease was not going to get me, because I knew it was out for two. So listening to those with experience and following their advice made me confident that I had done it right. I didn't. I misjudged one fundamental truth of Alzheimer's and its never-ending way of playing tricks with Jan's brain. The disease would sometimes let her vibrant personality burst through, and then, convinced, some of her friends and I was anything but a loving husband and caregiver. This is after she was in assisted living, I think. So she was great. She was in assisted living. She wasn't a person who looked like she had Alzheimer's, which, by the way, there's no physical way to discover Alzheimer's. She looked like Jan. She was upbeat. Alzheimer's has a way of bringing out fundamentally one of the personality traits that you have. If you were an asshole, you'd be more of an asshole. If you were a vibrant, fun person, it enhances that part of the personality. So that's what Jan became, a much more vibrant person. So the disease would sometimes let her vibrant personality burst through, And that convinced some of her friends that I was anything but a loving husband and caregiver. Some were convinced that I had let Jan down, that I had acted in all the wrong ways. And the hardest accusation of all was that I didn't love Jan. And worse, that I was purposely hurting her by moving, some said dumping her into this facility. In their eyes, I was a man whose actions bore the mark of betrayal. That's what they said to me.
So how did you deal with that?
First, I was stunned. I realized this is probably another part of not being totally aware. I was stunned that people didn't get it. Like, don't you get it? Don't you understand? Don't you know her? That I was stunned that somebody thought I would be this person and that I would do that when all I was trying to do was to help her. So this is one of her college friends. They were going to, I'm not making this up. How can I make this up? They were going to rent an apartment with a caregiver and take her out of the facility and put her in the apartment, no matter what I wanted, because they were convinced that I was doing this so I could, like, I can't even remember what it was. And I couldn't face this head on, so we faced it in a different way. Diane helped. Dick Lundgren helped. We had an intervention in the living room at Jan's family home with her mother, brothers, sisters, and this couple, these friends. And another person who was an expert who had helped me with placing Jan, who really was an expert in dealing with Alzheimer's. And they had, I wasn't there, they had a very, you know what the diplomats say, frank and honest conversation. They talked, they answered the questions. It started with hostility towards them, and it actually ended up with them, most of them, coming to understand that what we were all doing for Jan was what Jan needed more than anything. She was not being abandoned. I was not betraying her. We were caring for her in the only way possible, which was to get her into a facility like this. And that solved that problem.
Did it change your relationship with them?
Because I didn't mention the name, I could say this. She still sends Christmas cards, and I still throw them away. I'm sorry, but you know, it was just a horrible thing to do and a horrible thing to go through. So, but I didn't really have to have a relationship with them. The brothers and the sisters and Jan's mother really began to understand. I think that really helped. And you know, Jan was in a facility in her hometown in Bellevue, which is where she lived, and her mom's 5 minutes away, and her brother's 5 minutes away, and I did that on purpose so she would have family around her. So they were seeing her and reacting with her. So it was really important that they understand what was happening to her so that when they went to see her, they would understand what she was going through or what she could not do with them.
Did there come a point in time where she didn't recognize you anymore, didn't know you were her husband?
We're in Beijing, in our apartment in Beijing. And we'd done a fun story. We'd done a story about the village in China where they do all the paint stuff. Like, you've seen this in every Holiday Inn you've ever been in. They just paint masses of paintings and they sell them, and you can do that sort of stuff. And at the end, the producer had somebody paint a picture of me, which they unveiled. I'm like, oh my God, it's a picture of me, the young one, not that one. So I brought it home and I hung it. It was in our little apartment, our one-bedroom apartment. And one Sunday morning, we went to breakfast and we came back, and she looked at me. She said, "Do you live here? Because there's a picture of a guy in the living room who looks like you. So, do you live here?" And after that, it would kind of come and go. Let me tell you another story. Not a good one. Well, not a good story on me. When I moved to Denver and was with Mary Nell, we put her in a facility in Denver pretty much right away to get her so I could take care of her. We would go and visit. And we started getting this feedback from the people at the facility. after we would come to visit, Jan would become very angry. She pulled a bookshelf down one time. She went to hit somebody at one time. And you understand, in an Alzheimer's memory care facility, if you do that, they have to get rid of you because you're a danger to other patients. So I was terrified. We're like, what in the hell is going on? She couldn't tell us. So we divined what we think was going on is that when I was there with her, she recognized, remembered the voice. Marinelle, even I married her even after she said this, graciously said, well, she wouldn't recognize you because you have white hair now. So, but she recognized the voice. And then we would leave. And then somehow we felt like it was saying to her, look at where you are. Look what's going on. And she reacted with anger. So in the end, when we would go and visit, Marinelle would go and visit with Jan. And they'd talk and they'd do stuff. And I would sit in an office. The director had an office that was all glass. And I would sit and I would watch and see how they were doing. And that was the best that I could do, was to not be involved with her because it made it worse.
It's interesting as you say this. I mean, you have a very recognizable voice. I mean, for all of us who watch TV, we've heard you, we've seen you. I'd never thought of it like that. You know, each of us have a recognizable voice that we would hope that our spouse or loved ones would remember and recognize. Oh, that's a really interesting and compelling story.
If you and three other men started talking, your wife would know which voice was yours.
Yeah.
Because that memory would stay. So that's what we think happened.
So did you and Jan ever have a discussion about, after or even before her diagnosis, about end of life and what each of you wanted?
Remember the D word? Denial?
Right.
So this was really, all right. You all need to listen to this because every one of you may face this. So I really mean this seriously. You need to understand this. You need to understand there was a time with Jan when I could have had the conversation of, darling, what do you want me to do after you're gone? Could have had the conversation. And she could have told me what her wishes were for me. She could have said, if you touch another woman, I'll come back from the dead and I'll kill you. Or she could have said, no, you've got to live. You've got to keep going on. You've got to live. Never had that conversation. Ever. Now, I'm not alone in this. There are people dealing with loved ones with other diseases who don't have that conversation. Katie Couric. Do you remember Katie Couric? Her husband had colon cancer. And I had this conversation with her one time. They kept going, they kept trying, they kept doing new stuff. And I said, well, did you ever talk about this? And she said, I couldn't talk about it because it would have signaled that we were giving up. So she never had the same conversation. So it's not unusual. I mean, it's hard to avoid. Like, well, darling, I love you so much that when I'm dead, go have a life. But if you don't have that, then you don't know what you're supposed to do. And I divined, as best I could, from the way Jan had lived, to celebrating life, loving life with great vibrancy, that in that sense, she would have wanted me and everybody else involved to keep going, not to stop, because she was not a person who stopped. She went at life with all the joy that she could bring to it. But don't you wish? Don't I wish?
Don't I wish?
You didn't either.
No. So,
fair warning.
Just like I said in the beginning, and as you can all clearly see, this is a very personal, candid, intimate book. And you mentioned Marinelle, and you found love and companionship even before Jan had passed away. So why do you think that was important to share in the book?
Because I was a sinner who violated my marital oath and cheated on my wife. There are some other things in there too, which I'm sure I could remember if I thought about it. After we wrote the book and we started traveling, we discovered that there were a lot of men in my situation whose wives were in a facility, but had developed relationships with other women. And if I hadn't, I don't think I'd be here today. I thought a lot about, literally killing myself. I had a house in California, in Northern California, at Sea Ranch, if you know what that is, on the water, facing west, 50 feet to the bluff, and a 100-foot drop, and there's the ocean. And I swear to God, one night I was thinking, if I just walked 51 feet, the pain would stop. Because I wasn't really able to deal with it. I met Mary Nell the way people meet people these days. I met her on Match.com. I sent her a note from Tokyo, and I was telling somebody else the story today. She thought it was a Nigerian prince trying to scam her out of money. And she almost didn't answer. So Mary Nell is a widow. Her husband had died some years before. And she recognized what I didn't recognize, was that I was in the middle of grief. Jan was still alive. Jan was in a facility. Jan was deteriorating, but I was grieving. And somebody said this to me one time. We did a Sunday morning piece, and I used this in the piece because it struck me so hard. I talked about how hard it was to go see Jan, and every time I went, she changed. And he said, it's like going to the same funeral over and over again. And I needed to find someone who found me to understand that that was also part of the permission, was to have someone who understood what I was going through because she had gone through it. She would have gotten it anyway. She's very intuitive. But someone who could be there to help me, and sometimes to just give me permission to feel sad and to grieve and to keep grieving until it was done. I don't know if we ever stopped grieving, but to grieve through the process.
And how was this received by your family and Jan's family?
Jan's family was okay with it. They understood.
Was that surprising to you?
Yes, it was. In fact, it was Jan's mother who wrote a note, an email at one point, before this started with Mary Nell, who said, let's face it, Jan's not here anymore. And you are. You've got to go on. So she, in a sense, gave me that permission that the conversation I never had with Jan might have given with me. So I did that. I needed that. I couldn't have done this by myself. I couldn't have done it without somebody who knew, where is she? I couldn't have done this without somebody who knew what I was going through, who recognized what was happening and could pull me back from the brink, literally pull me back from the brink. I think it's harder for men to be alone than it is for women. We don't do well alone. You know, I told you my diet was popcorn and alcohol, so that's not a way that a man lives a very long time with that kind of a diet. Oh, God, I forgot to tell you, I also figured out how to make hamburger and fried onions. So I think that the only reaction we got was from a friend of hers who was Catholic, who thought that we were living in sin. So we did a story for Sunday morning about all of this, and talked about Jan and Mary Nell and the fact that I was going on. And the day it ran, we looked at all the comments. There were tons and tons of comments. 1 in 100 said, I hope you and the bitch you live with rot in hell. So they reran the story when Sergeant Triber died of Alzheimer's. And we looked at the comments again, and sure enough, there he was. Like I said before, I hope you and the bitch you live with rot in hell. It was like, an old friend. He's still with us. So suffice to say that the comments were extremely understanding. There was a guy who wrote, so I can't even tell you who I am. I'm a pastor in a small church in the South, but I understand what's going on in you. You know, I give you my blessing. So people were really, really amazing to help us get through that.
What would Jan think about the book?
Oh, God. No one has ever asked me that question before. I would ask her, she's a journalist like me. I think she would feel that it was accurate, because that's the first thing you go for as a journalist. You try to at least be accurate. I hope she would feel that the parts of the book about her, captured what she was. And in the end, she would probably be so embarrassed about what had happened to her that she'd throw the damn thing at me. Because I told the hardest parts of her and her coming down and her changing and what she was losing and all these things that were going on. And I think she would have felt embarrassed. But Jan always believed that, everybody has a philosophy. This is Jan's. We're here for a reason. Like, we have a purpose. And I think she would have read the book and said, you helped other people. That was my purpose. Thank you. Thank you.
So then,
never thought of that before. Go ahead.
So then,
you're good.
Thank you. So then, do you feel it accomplished what the goals were that you first had when you started the book?
I don't know, but I will say that many people, we traveled for 10 years talking about the book. Alzheimer's associations and caregiving groups and things like that. And people came up and said, this book really helped me. And I said, okay, Jan, did you hear that? This book really helped them. So, and if that is the measure, then I accomplished it. Making me read it aloud was not what I had in mind. But I hope so. I know I've heard from people who've read it, especially men who were in this situation, who were afraid to talk about it, even to their own children, that I think it gave them permission to be and to say what they needed and to be what they are.
You told me about someone you met in an airport. Can you tell the story?
The Sunday morning piece had just aired and the book was out, and we were flying to Billings, Montana, because I'm from Montana, to go do a book signing event for 8 people. But it didn't matter, because they're my people. And we were in the airport, and a very young woman in her 20s stopped us and said, I know who you are, and I saw the piece. And she said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to have this conversation with my husband. I'm going to have the what happens if I die and you're alive conversation. In her 20s, I'm going to have that conversation with my husband because I can see how important it is. And I hope to God you did. People do. Most of us, put you in there, blow it.
Yes.
We don't do it.
Yeah.
We don't do it because, as like Katie said, you don't do it because it's like saying, you're going to die. You don't go to a person who's sick with a disease and say, ha ha, you're going to die. What do you want me to do? Because it's as if you're saying to them, we're done. I couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. And yet, this young lady who's 20-something decided she was going to do that because it was so important to take that lesson home with her.
So it's interesting to me that in some sense the lens has been turned. You were always someone who interviewed people. You did stories of other people's lives.
I kind of hate this.
That's going to be my question. So here you kind of turned, with your book, your lens around. Now you've gone out for 10 years to all these different groups to talk about it. Has that been hard and difficult?
All right, I just told your wife this. We stopped. We stopped doing it. We stopped doing it. Look how hard it is to do. So we stopped doing it. I said to Marinelle, every time we did this, it was as bad as the first time. It was like pulling a scab off and watching it bleed all over again. But your extraordinary wife and my good friends who suggested it, we had this conversation. Can we do it again? Can we do it one more time? I haven't done this in years, literally. So we decided to do it one more time, and God damn it, it's as hard as the first time. It still is. I cannot tell you how hard it is. I try to not get so emotional, and yet it's like it was just yesterday.
So if you had one piece of advice to give to someone else who's a caregiver, Alzheimer's, their loved one or spouse has Alzheimer's, cancer, serious injury, just one piece of advice that you wish someone had told you in the beginning, what would that be?
Live to survive. Don't let it bring you down. Don't die like people who care for Alzheimer's patients die before the patient. Don't die like you. The whole point of the book, if there is a point to the book, there are 27 points, but we'll do this one. One of the points of the book is you've got to survive to take care of the person you love. You're the caregiver. You've got to survive because it's your life. I called it the disease, and I kept saying the disease was out to get us both. The disease wanted two people. It wanted Jan, and it wanted me. And I actually made this like a vision in my mind of what this thing was like. You're not going to get me. And I would say to anyone in this situation, especially with Alzheimer's, don't let the disease get you. You must survive. You must do what you need to do. You must let people help you. You know, like there may be people that actually give you a hand. So that's my prayer as well as my advice.
You told me at lunch that you had an interesting, amazing Alzheimer's story. Oh,
it's actually true. As my colleague Dan Rather said, it benefits from being true. There was a woman who was in an Alzheimer's facility in Maryland, and her son lived right next to it. So he would always include her. She was going down, but he would always include her with the family group, and they were doing things. And one time they had a party, something like that, and she came over, and the daughter-in-law came up and said, "Oh, Nana, how are you?" And she looked at her and said, "Who the hell are you?" And she said, "Oh, Nana, I'm the woman who married your son." You could have done better. It's true. It's a true story.
So I know this won't be easy, but your writing is so good. I'd really like to end with you reading what's the last page of the book, if that's okay.
Okay. I read this in the car. I read it over and over again, trying to, when you told me you wanted this. So I took care of her as long and as well as I could. There were things I should have done better, but these I cannot now change. There were things I did well, and that was good. And now the hardest thing is saying goodbye. I do not know if she would understand or approve. Still, I will take my cue from her and from what made her once everything to me. Choose life. Celebrate life. And so, my darling, I will do just that. It will dim the memories of us as I make new ones. The thought of that makes me sad and makes me miss you. But it must be that way. I wish there had been a moment, a quiet time, when you could have talked to me about this. I trusted you to know these things, to guide me when it all seemed black around me. And you always did until one day you couldn't, and then you were gone. It is too late to give you one last kiss, but I will live it. Excuse me. I'm going to do it. Hang on. But I will live how you taught me and choose life and celebrate life, even though moving forward means leaving you behind. Can there be somewhere inside your mind a way you can know that I will always love you, always miss you? I feel the touch of your hand in mine slipping away, and then it is gone. I will try not to be sad for what we once had and lost. That won't be easy in the dark of night when no one is looking, and the tears still come. Excuse me. Instead, I will work to remember and to celebrate the wonder of what we once were. I think that would make you smile. It is time now. We must go different ways. Dearest Jan, with you, I once believed in forever. And I would believe I would never have to say, from darling to darling, goodbye.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you. Oh. Oh. Thank you.
You were great.
Oh.